Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Tonight, briefly before we start, as you know, I've been in the hospital this week. I'm having some problems with bleeding ulcers. I just want to thank everybody that wrote to me and supported me, left comments on my post. Thank you for all your support. You have no idea how good that made me feel. But tonight I feel even better because I'm with my good friend, our guest, Mike Guffey, tonight. Dialysis Patient Citizens Stalwart, having served on the board of directors since 2010 as co-treasurer, treasurer, and voting member with the Kidney Care Partners, the KCP, and their representative to the Kidney Care Quality Assurance Alliance. Mike served on the panel that created the medical reconciliation measurements. He also served on the Kidney Community Emergency Response Pandemic and Infectious Disease Committees, including as co-chair in 2016. Mike has since resigned from the DPC board and the KCP and the KCQA in December of 2022. Caster no longer meets regularly, and he's also served multiple terms with the National Quality Forum until they changed contractors. As you know, Mike is a kidney patient like you and me, who in April of 2008 crashed into dialysis. In January of 2012, he received a kidney transplant. It's my understanding that that kidney's still working. Mike is an able and capable kidney advocate who has traveled in the past to Washington, D.C. to speak with his members of Congress on behalf of all of us kidney patients. So please give a warm welcome to our friend, Mike Guffey. Mike, how are you tonight?
Doing great. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. It's been way too long, my friend.
Yes, it has.
Did I state everything correctly in the introduction?
Yes. Yeah, you did.
Okay, good.
I
That's
think
the
I like
first.
to use the word, though. I mean, I did resign from the board of DPC, but I sort of looked at it as retired. I've been in the board for
Okay.
12 years, and it was time for some fresh blood.
Okay, we'll get some new
And that was
guys in
really
there.
the phrasing on it. We've been through one of our board meetings, and had a consultant, and who was explaining that your most valuable time is probably in the first 6 years or so on a board, and then it's time to start
Okay.
figuring out your exit routine. And I figured I was twice that long,
Okay.
so made my exit.
Please tell us a little bit about where you grew up, your educational experiences, and your employment experiences.
So you want me to run off your audience tonight, eh?
Whatever.
I am a native from Kansas. I'm from Kansas City. Lived in the Missouri side of the metropolitan area for a long time, and I live in the Kansas side. I I grew up in Kansas City the whole time. I originally went to the University of Virginia for a year. Decided that wasn't where I really wanted and needed to be, so I transferred back home to the University of Missouri, and have a bachelor in journalism from the University of Missouri. When I got out of school, I'd worked all my summers at the bank where I am currently employed. They had invited me to come back and apply with them for a job when I got out of school. I was thinking this would be a good way to get an introduction to like a marketing type job. In the late 80s, even then, print journalism wasn't really where you wanted to be. So I went in and interviewed with a bank for a marketing position, and the person who was in charge of HR at the time that I had built a rapport with said that he wanted to hire me just in the management training program because they thought it was easier to teach somebody who could communicate business sense than it was to teach somebody who had business sense how to communicate. And I always laugh and say
That's
he's probably rolling in his grave to this day, but
very good. Very good.
been with the bank for, as we were discussing, 37 years full time, still there today. And I currently manage our business continuity and disaster recovery, well, our business continuity area.
It's 37 years. That's a long time.
Yes. And some days it feels like a really long time, but
let's talk about I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike.
I said I tell everybody I started when I was 12.
Let's talk about your first experiences with kidney disease. When did you first notice symptoms?
It would have been in early, like January, February of 2008. I didn't know what they were at the time. I have no history in my family of kidney disease. I'd never had anything like this before. But I had swelling in my body, some other places, and really was losing my energy. But I was a project manager and got sent to Colorado for a project. We were implementing a new building in Colorado, and I got out there and I was like, okay, I really blurred. My vision started blurring, and so my boss, who was in Kansas City time, told me I had to go see a doctor there at an urgent clinic, and they didn't look at my legs or anything. They just looked at my blood pressure, which was high because I think in part, I was on blood pressure medications, but I think it was higher because of the stress my body was under. And they thought I had Rocky Mountain fever. And
Okay.
so I was out in Colorado.
Because of the altitude.
Yeah, because of the altitude. And they thought it was a form of altitude sickness, Rocky Mountain fever.
All right. So working as a project manager in Colorado, they thought it was altitude sickness. What did they do for you? What kind of medical treatment did they do?
They upped my blood pressure medicine, and they gave me some antibiotics that they thought were going to help me maybe stabilize with the altitude sickness, that Rocky Mountain fever, but not much. And they didn't ask a lot, but it wasn't my regular doctor.
Okay.
So I was out there.
Did your condition improve or did it get worse?
It probably more than anything else, its condition stayed the same, but I was doing things to adapt. I found that, things that were helping were not drinking much. I was not having much appetite, and I was throwing up occasionally when I was eating. So sorry for the wonderful dinner time conversation.
It's okay.
But, and my boss told me when I got back, she was not going to let me come on site until I'd been to see my primary care physician. And I was supposed to go 2 weeks after that. I was supposed to go on vacation to see my parents who live part of the year in Arizona.
Okay.
And so I came back. I saw my primary care physician. He also said I had Rocky Mountain fever. He also thought I had the touches of the flu. And he said I needed to take some time off and rest. And that was probably my biggest thing. But again, he didn't look at my legs for the swelling was, and I didn't know enough. Stupidly, I didn't know enough at that time to say, ooh, this is probably a big sign of what's wrong with me.
Yeah. Okay. Did you take the trip to Arizona to see your folks?
Yes. Yeah, and that was when things really sort of bottomed out. I took a flight out to Arizona. I almost didn't make it off the plane. I had a hard time getting myself up and upright, and then was sort of stumbling through and really dizzy and disoriented through the terminal, and caught a ride to my parents' place. And my mom was like, let's have some dinner. And it's like, I don't want dinner. I'm going to bed. And that was like 3:30 or 4 in the afternoon.
Oh, wow.
And and they were trying to insist. It's like, nope, no dinner. And I said, if I don't feel better tomorrow morning, we're going to the urgent care clinic up here, because they lived in Carefree, which I don't know if you're familiar with Phoenix and Scottsdale. It's up north of Scottsdale.
Okay.
There's Carefree and Cave Creek, and Cave Creek's the old western town. And we got there, and the next morning I really was not feeling any better. So I said, my call, not how I want to spend my vacation, but I got to figure out what this is. So can we please go to the urgent care clinic when they open at 8? And I went to the urgent care clinic. Oops, sorry, go ahead.
Did you go to the urgent care clinic?
Yes. As soon as they opened.
What did they tell you?
The doctor up there was a little bit coy with me, I think, because I think he knew exactly what was going on. but he said he wasn't prepared to handle and diagnose what I had. But he told me his instructions very clearly were, you were to go from here directly to the nearest emergency room, which is about 10 miles away. Don't pass go, don't go have breakfast, don't do anything else. Go to the emergency room and present yourself. They need to take a look at you.
Okay. And did you go to the emergency room?
Yes. Yeah, I actually
What
drove.
happened there?
Well, I drove down and I walked in, and my mother was parking the car that we had. And when I walked in, the doctor asked, the emergency room doctor asked, how did you get here? And it's like, I drove. And the doctor said, no, you did not drive. I can tell by looking at you, you're pretty much comatose. And B, when they got the labs back, and I always get it backwards, my bun was 29.
Okay.
So whichever one of those should be much lower than that. And it was way elevated. And the doctor said, this is one of the highest readings I've ever seen on somebody who's still walking. So, no, you did not drive down. It's like, well, I hate to tell you this, but I did. So they admitted me to the ICU unit. It was pretty much a brand new hospital. So I was one of only 2 patients in the ICU unit. And they were trying to, as they always do, the people in the unit, I didn't see a nephrologist the first day, but the people in the unit that had experience with the kidney stuff were trying to fill me in, and the attending physician in the ICU were filling me in and filling my parents in the background of what's going on. And the one thing I do remember most clearly about the whole thing is the doctor telling my parents that the next 48 hours were probably going to be touch and go. But if I made it through that, I had a decent chance of surviving.
Okay. Our good friend Blankenship says hello, Mike.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm sorry. Go ahead, buddy.
No, I was just going to say, it was just not something I expected to hear. I was in a bed about 5 feet away, and I think they thought I couldn't, I was out of it. And it's like, I heard that, and it's like, I sat up a little bit, and it's like, say what? And the doctor's like, don't worry about it. Well, you're in good hands.
Okay.
So the next
morning,
did
they come to a diagnosis?
Oh, yeah, they knew I had kidney failure.
Okay.
They were sure. I mean, that's when I got admitted. I was admitted with extreme kidney failure.
All right. Do you know what caused your kidneys to fail? For example, like I have PKD.
No, I don't.
Okay.
They did, when I was in the hospital in Phoenix and Scottsdale, they did 2 biopsies, including one they gave to the Mayo Clinic, and they did a full electromagnetic reading on it and couldn't come up. All they did was eliminate things. It wasn't high blood pressure. I wasn't diabetic. It's all these, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. And my desire really at some point was to get home. So I needed to get home, for work. And it's the only way I was thinking, that's what I need to do more than anything else.
After you were diagnosed, did they place you on dialysis?
Yes. Yeah, it started in the hospital the first morning after I was there.
Okay.
And it was probably my favorite time on dialysis because they had heated blankets, and I remember that very distinctly.
Okay.
Because when I was on in-center hemo here, my blood pressure would always drop near the end of my sessions. And so they were always freezing me out with my knowledge and my understanding and my agreement. But it's like, I just want those heated blankets again, please.
Did they put in a catheter on an emergency basis?
Yes. Yeah, I had a chest catheter for, I want to say, probably the first 4 months.
All right. Eventually, did they put in a fistula or a graft?
Yeah, I got a fistula. I still have the fistula.
Okay.
I still have my drill.
And this was all in 2008, correct?
Yes.
All right. How long were you in Arizona with this problem before they sent you home?
4 weeks.
Okay.
And part of that was...
After you got home, I take dialysis continued?
Yes. Yeah. I had sort of a lucky deal that my father's primary care physician was a nephrologist, and they were friends. I had the nephrologist, the doctor's son, was in my high school class, and so they had made a connection. And they arranged for me to be, transported and immediately set up with dialysis here, so I could come home.
Okay. I understand that you were able to work dialysis in with your
Yes.
work schedule. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I did a couple of things when I first started dialysis, and I know not many units do this anymore. I was actually on the late shift that started at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. So I could go to work and do my work, go in a little bit early if I needed to, and then leave at like 4 o'clock to get to dialysis and get settled in for the evening.
Okay.
There were occasionally times when I had to work from home or do something else because, as anybody who's been in dialysis knows, it's tough. Not something I wish on my worst enemy.
So I am taking that you were on in-center hemodialysis?
Yes.
Okay.
I stayed on in-center hemodialysis the entire time I was on dialysis because I live alone.
Okay.
So
how long were you on dialysis?
Till 2012.
Okay. Did you have any health issues or challenges while you were on dialysis?
No, I know I was healthy otherwise, which was lucky for me. Actually, I'll tell you, my main challenges I had while I was in dialysis and trying to get listed for a transplant had to do with my private insurance through my company.
Okay. I understand that back in 2011, there was a tornado that struck Joplin, Missouri.
Yes.
Can you explain how you were able to help out?
I got one of the first notifications up here the tornado had hit, and I called the regional president from down there to have him, and we reached out to his employees to make sure they were all safe and they were doing well. And then I worked with projects to helping run from Kansas City, several projects to try and clean. We had a branch that was damaged heavily, not totally destroyed, thankfully, but it was damaged. And I helped work with them in our maintenance area to try and get that restored. We had it back up within a couple of weeks. And before that had it available, we made an arrangement with there were at that time 3 branches in Joplin, so we could route customers to the other branches.
Okay.
But my doctors would not let me. I wanted to go down and see it. That's what I sort of live for in my job. And my doctor told me if I did, he would shoot me.
So they weren't allowed to do that, go on the scene.
Nope.
But you were still helping out while you were on dialysis, correct?
Yes. Yep.
All right.
I was holding the regular conference calls. I was running down, checklists and things for everybody to keep those going. Did a lot of outreach for some other things that were happening in the community to try and coordinate with the people on the ground down there.
Okay. Let's talk about your kidney advocacy experiences. When did you first begin to advocate for your fellow kidney patients?
It would have been in 2010. I think that's right. I'm trying to look at my stuff again. When I joined the board of directors for DPC, which is everything with me sort of a strange story. The bank where I worked is very big on volunteer activities, and we got 3 days a year to use, 2 days a year to use on volunteer activities. And my boss at the time pulled me aside and said, you're not in great condition. And I was like, thanks, appreciate that. But she said, I want you to find something that's really meaningful for you. I don't want to see that you're going to harvesters to help load and unload food and getting worn out. Why don't you find something meaningful for you in the kidney community? And I had signed up when I first was admitted and had started my dialysis treatments. I'd gotten the DPC newsletter. then about the night I got home and I had my DPC newsletter and it said, we're looking for board members.
Okay.
And
What happened after that?
I had a set of interviews with the existing staff and the existing board, DPC, and they welcomed me on board as a board member.
Excellent.
So that would have probably been December.
Tell us about the kind of advocacy work that you did for them?
I mean, part of it was working, obviously, as a board member on developing policy and helping implement and deciding policy, but we also had the at least an annual fly-in. And for a while, it was a semi-annual fly-in to Washington, D.C., and I always went to those. I think that's where you and I met the first time.
Yes. Absolutely. Back in 2012, 2013.
Yeah, somewhere in that vicinity. And we'd go back and have the meeting and go to the Hill. And I always enjoyed it. I remember the first time I went to the Hill, it's a long day. I would tell people if you're going, it really can be a long day. Because I remember walking back through the airport that night going home and caught a glimpse in one of the little jewelry stores along the corridor at Reagan National and thought, wow, there's a really old guy over there. He doesn't look like he's doing so well. And I looked the second time, I'm like, oh, that's me. But as I told everybody when I got home, it's like, this is the best I felt. I mean, it was hard. I mean, it wasn't easy for me at that point, but it was the most fulfilling thing I've done, going out there and being able to represent for dialysis patients, explaining my story a little bit, being there with other dialysis patients, being there with, some of the people out of the industry, the support teams out of some of the dialysis centers, and going and meeting with them, presenting the face of, this is a dialysis patient. And I was relatively young and still relatively healthy. So a couple of meetings I go into, and they would start addressing and saying, so you must work for one of the clinics as a doctor. And it's like, no, I'm a patient. So,
okay.
I mean, that was always, I enjoyed those. I've hosted here in Kansas City. I've hosted my local congressman multiple times at different centers. I've had more home centers for dialysis because, every time they want to go to a center, they want to go somewhere where they might want to have a little propping up in the voting.
Right.
And so I go places and you'd be like, okay, can you guys at least tell me where some of the basics are so that I don't turn around and walk into a closet?
I also understand that you met with members of the Department of Health and Human Services. Is that correct?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, I don't want to do anything that comes back on anybody else, but that was not my favorite time sometimes because some of those people were very set in their ways. And I ran across a couple of them on a couple of the health panels I served on later with Acuity, where they were there and they had a set mindset and they couldn't get into thinking about the patients. And that was my role. And when I went there, when I went to Health and Human Services, the best meeting I ever had was with one of the brand new secretaries under Trump. And he had a family member that had been had kidney issues. And so he was very receptive. And I think it sort of hacked off some of the other people in the room with me, the professionals, because they present stuff and then he'd come back with questions and come back and focus on me. Well, tell me as a patient, it's what they're saying good. Well, let's see. They paid my way here. I don't really want to walk back to the airport. So yes.
Yeah.
But it was. I mean, that was the best decision. Like I met in Baltimore with some of the the career staff, and that was not as pleasant. I didn't think we were getting listened to as much.
Okay.
But
talk to us about. Oh, go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
I was going to say one of the things I would stress to anybody is get involved. The problem is you go to a lot of these meetings and a lot of these fly-ins and things, and outside of a DPC, an AAKP, an NKF, a lot of these things, it's the professionals there, and they're presenting very much, sort of their angle on things. And it helps to have a kidney patient with them. It validates it. There's a lot more interest, I think, from the staff, the member of Congress or the staff on, looking at what's going on when the patient's actually there and can explain it to them, rather than hearing somebody trying to explain to them about why they think they might need either a bigger or a new dialysis center, and it's been blocked for various reasons. I think sometimes that, is not as self-serving. I think having the people there, when I was our representative on KCP, which I assume you were going to get to, and I'm going to cut you off.
That's okay.
We've had patient ambassadors, kidney care partners, and when one before me had stepped down, Harant Jamgoshian, who is our executive director, said, "Would you mind doing this?" And I said, "No, I enjoyed it, but it was interesting. I go there a lot of times to their meetings. They'd have a quarterly fly-in and a monthly conference calls, and I'd find out that I was really the only patient in the room. Everybody else that had all the other, quote unquote patient groups, they had their professional staff there." And Harant was, that's what I really loved about Harant was very strong about, you're the patient. We need to bring the patient voice. We're a patient's voice. We are the patient's voice. We need to have you in the room rather than me and my staff. Let them see you, let them, experience you, let them understand you. And I made some really good friends in the community out of that, including my first nephrologist from Arizona. He had gone to work for one of the pharmaceutical companies. And I went to a KCP meeting and turned around and saw the name tag and said, "Oh, Dr. Cooper." I said, "You don't remember me, but you always refer to me as your mystery banker from the Midwest." And he says, "I remember you." It was sort of funny with a little reunion on it.
Excellent. Talk to us a little bit about your experiences with the DPC as co-treasurer and treasurer. What kinds of things did you do?
I produced the financials in a readable format for all the board members, as opposed to the initial way it came out from the accountants, and led the finance committee as far as, where we were position wise, what our revenues look like, where we had some potential issues with either lack of revenue or expenses. And that was in the earlier days. The finances have gotten much more robust over time. But I was also a key member of the board on a lot of the decision making and served in most of the board committees. So, but a lot of it was working with Harant. Harant would work on his budget, and then he and I would discuss, and we'd go through what was appropriate.
Okay.
By the budget.
Talk to us about I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Talk to us about your experiences with the medical reconciliation measurements.
Sure. After I've been in KCP for a while, they had the KCQA, which was the quality assurance group from Kidney Care Partners, that was really looking at how to help from an informed constituent, as opposed to a lot of the academic institutions, which will probably get me shot for saying again, but they're helping develop the measurements that really mattered to the patients. So, there was a lot of focus early on from other organizations, some of the universities, some from other places, with like the hours of staff training. And, you had to maximize your hours of staff training. Well, if I train the staff and they don't improve their behaviors, woohoo, you did an extra 50 hours of training last year. But it didn't improve the quality of life for patients. So let's focus on things that were quality of life. And one of the things we picked up early was the medical measurements and how to do reconciliation, because most dialysis patients are seeing multiple doctors. And how do you get everything straightened out so that if I'm seeing a cardiologist and I'm seeing a bone density specialist and I'm seeing an endocrinologist, and a primary care physician and a nephrologist, how do I see that, I'm not being prescribed things that go against each other, or I'm not being prescribed things that, are harmful in the dosages you're starting to get. And so that was one of the major roles, was trying to get away to require a reconciliation and require through the dialysis clinic that they do a reconciliation of all the prescriptions so they could tell what the patient was really taking. And also could ask the patient, are you really taking this?
Okay.
It was fun. I mean, there's a lot of medical work. There's a lot of stuff that was, over my head in some of the measurement stuff, but it was fun doing it. It was fun. I was listening. They respected my opinion on things. So, I worked with them in that. I've worked with them on a couple of other measurements, a couple of which didn't go through all the way, but they were working on some additional ones when I stepped down. So,
all right. Talk to us about your work with the Kidney Community Emergency Response Pandemic and Infectious Disease Committee.
Okay. That's something that came out of one of the fly-ins to DC. I was sitting next to, I don't know if you know the name, Wendy Schrag.
Okay.
She used to be with, and I think it's used to be, I think she is retired. She was with DaVita and was a director from out in Wichita. And I met her at a couple of local events in Kansas City where they're having regional kidney events with the Midwest Transplant Network and some other things. And so we were sitting on a bus and getting to go down to the hill, and she came and sat by me and smiled. And it's like, okay, I've been on this long enough to know something's up. And she said, so I understand you work in business continuity and emergency preparedness. And I said, yes, but usually that wouldn't be a reason to sit by me. That's usually why people get up in the bus and move to the other end of the bus away from me. And she said, no, I have a perfect thing for you. And she explained about Kaser and her role, and she was involved with the infectious diseases. And so I said I'd be happy to join. And I was on for 2 or 3 years, and Wendy stepped down, and a couple other people stepped down. And so they were looking for somebody that could head the infectious diseases committee. And I said, I'll take a shot at it. And so at that point, we were meeting on a quarterly basis, a little bit more often if we needed to, and discussing trends. We did have some discussions early on, especially with, we also have discussions with Kaser if there were hurricanes in Florida and a lot of those types of things as well that I would get involved in and listen to. I mean, I don't have any business units that I'm responsible for that aren't in that area, but it was always interesting to listen to and hear what was going on. And sometimes be able to give a little bit of advice based on some things we've had here when we've had, roads torn up because of, blizzards and stuff like that. We've had tornadoes, obviously, and roads get torn up and some of those things get torn up. And it was trying to use some of that experience and bring that to the forefront.
Okay. Talk to us about your experiences with the National Quality Forum.
That's when I have sort of mixed feelings about it. I liked it when we first started. It's a group. It was a nonprofit group out of DC that had a contract to work with Health and Human Services, and they were overseeing for various medical conditions the development and the review of new measurements and rules like that. So
okay.
We would discuss some things would be, I had to excuse myself, for example, when the medical measurement review came up reconciliation came up before the NQF, because I was too involved in it. So I couldn't be involved in the discussions. I couldn't be involved in the voting. And I stepped down. I withheld from that part of it. But there also were a lot of things that came from other areas. And they were interesting discussions. I think I was sometimes on the short end of the votes. But my look at it always was, what's this mean for the patient? Again, if you're trying to put something through again, that you want to put something in and memorialize how many hours of training a dialysis technician should have. Let's make that be more meaningful and say, once you've completed this many hours of training, you take a test and you have to get above a certain score to show that you're actually learning from the training. That would help the patient.
I understand that you are also part of a support group at home, at work. Can you please discuss what that experience was like?
Well, it's sort of multiple tiered thing. I had a lady I worked with who in the early 80s had toxic shock syndrome. And she had a heart transplant. And I'd worked with her. I'd known her story from before I had my issues. I also had another lady I work with who's undergone either 2 or 3 bouts with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so, when I started having my issues, they were both there, especially Teresa, who was a lady with a heart transplant. And she would, if she saw me drooping or not being happy or not, she'd come and read me the riot act. Look, you've got a curable thing. This is something you can do. You can get a transplant at some point. You can, you need to take care of yourself. That's your first job. And so we had that. I had some other people at work that I worked with that I always called my non-nursing nurses. And they'd be back all the time. What are you drinking? Because they knew I wasn't allowed to drink very much. So, they would always come by and supervise. They'd check if I was out. They would call. And it was, that way was a lot of support of me. But it also came back to when one of the other people was sick or had anything, we band back together and support, whoever needed it. And I had a couple of people I worked with who had relatives that were going through kidney issues. And, I pitched in, I talked to their relatives. I talked through them if that was how they preferred it. Just let me know what I can do to help. This is a treatable condition, but let me give you some advice. When they tell you limit your liquids, you got to. They're telling you foods to avoid. It's not fun. I'm in Kansas City. The whole time I was on dialysis until I had a transplant, I never had potatoes. So the whole idea of leaching out the potassium from it, that never interested me. I never had barbecue for that whole 4+ years. And being in Kansas City, that's a serious give up. But it was like, I need to do these things. If I have barbecue, it's so salty, I'm immediately going to go somewhere and drink 60 ounces of water. And now I'm back in trouble. Now I'm going to go in and they can hear me when I'm coming into the dialysis clinic. I'm weighing myself and they can hear the water jiggling. But I also did something that was sort of, at the time, was interesting. We always have things. We always have had medical presentations at the bank as part of our insurance program and general well-being. And one thing we had never done was they never had a kidney program at all. And so I talked to somebody from our HR department who was great to work with. And she was a friend of mine, which, again, when you've been there 37 years, pretty much everybody's a friend. And I said, I want to sponsor a lunch around kidney disease. And they said, well, how are you going to do that? And I said, well, I'm going to go to my dialysis clinic tonight, and I'm going to ask them for a date. If you guys will approve this, I'm going to ask them for a date, and I'm going to get my nephrologist, hopefully. I'm going to get the clinic administrator and 2 of the nurses to come and do the demonstration with the kidney, the wooden kidney and all that, and really talk about what this is. And I said, and I'm going to be quiet, which is hard for me. But I'm going to be pretty much quiet throughout a lot of this, even though, it wasn't a secret around the bank. I didn't hide the fact that I was in kidney failure. And so a lot of people knew, but we did the whole presentation. And at the end of it, when it was time to thank them for being there, I got up to thank the medical people for being there and turned around to the audience and said, and you maybe wonder why, as opposed to having, one of my HR partners get up and say this, I'm the one saying something. And I said, I guess there's confidentiality information I'm breaching on my own behalf, but this is my medical care team. These are the people that keep me up and going every day, along with about 6 or 8 people in the audience at the bank that did a lot. And I said, this is what you have to understand. You can have a team. It's important to do that. It was important for me to keep working and keep going and not to sit around and moan and groan. So
Okay.
that was what I was really trying for, and it was really well received. It was a great thing. The nurses, the medical people enjoyed it. The clinic administrator enjoyed it. The people in the room enjoyed it. I was laughing because it was a lunch and learn. And when they got everything out, I have one of those little, 8-ounce cans of 7-Up with my lunch. And when we were pulling things out, I'd also brought a 20-ounce bottle of water and something else. And I first got the 20-ounce bottle of water out of my bag. And I saw my nurse, and she was looking at me, not very happy. And I handed the bottle off to somebody else. And I just laughed and told her afterwards, I said, I thought you might want some props. So I brought a couple different sizes, but I had an 8-ounce can of 7-Up. That was my drink for lunch, as it usually is.
Okay. One of the things that you're famous for, Michael, and you've mentioned to us, is the importance of keeping a positive attitude. And just so folks know, in the original post for this broadcast on my personal Facebook page, there are links of my research on Mike. And that includes an article that was published by the DPC that talks about Michael and the importance of keeping a positive attitude. Can you talk to us a little bit about why that was so important to you?
Because a lot of the stuff I saw with patients who were succeeding and thriving, and some of the differentiations with some of the ones who weren't, really was that a lot of people who are really doing well on dialysis were also having a positive attitude, trying to make each day as good as it could be, keeping links with people. I will admit wholeheartedly that my close friend list got trimmed quite a bit during that period, just because I didn't feel like going out as much. But it was really keeping that upbeat message and how do I work with my team at the clinic? How do I work with my nephrologist when we started working with a transplant center? How do I work with those, keeping a positive attitude, keeping activity, so I didn't just sit around and become sort of embittered or saying this doesn't work and give up. That was part of my standard approach. I also, from a personal standpoint, my father had multiple sclerosis for probably 25 years, fairly late in life. And that was sort of his attitude too, was, you're not going to tell me I can't do this. Over time he learned he couldn't do some things, but it's you've got to keep going. And that was always his thing with me, was you got to keep going.
Okay. Talk to us about when you became listed for a kidney transplant and where you were listed.
Okay, you want the tangled tail or a short tail?
I'm here all night, Mike, whatever suits you.
The tangled tail is when I first started, my original nephrologist, and I had bank insurance, and my original nephrologist was with a local transplant clinic, as well as with a local transplant hospital. And also he ran the dialysis clinic I was in originally. And he started me immediately. We went back. I said I had 2 biopsies in Arizona. I had one more biopsy in Kansas City that they actually infiltrated me when they were trying to get the biopsy and put the drip in my hand, which seems to be a recurring theme with me. But they, when he said after that, he was honest. He was probably mid 70s at the time. And he said, look, I'm not looking for a case. You may be the most earth-shattering case we'd ever find if we could figure out what's wrong with you. But we're spinning our wheels, wasting time trying to figure out what was happening, instead of focusing on what your number one goal should be, which is getting a transplant. So we started down that path. and it was St. Luke's here in Kansas City. And as we were about halfway, 3/4 of the way through, my insurance at the time dropped support for St. Luke's and for the clinic I was at, which was, and I always get it wrong, so I won't try it again. It was, I always want to say DCC, and that's not right. It's one that's no longer in business. That was out of Tennessee. Okay. And they told me I had to move clinics. And it's like, but my nephrologist won't see me if I'm not in his clinic. And I'm already halfway through the testing process to get listed there. And so they said I could continue to get listed. And about 2 months later, the alternate surgeon at St. Luke's quit. So they only have one transplant surgeon, which disqualifies you from being an active participant as a transplant hospital, transplant institution. So that shut that all down. And I did move. I moved to a different clinic, different nephrologist, and all that. At the end of that year, they also came back to me and said, when they were taking a look at things, my new insurance company, we also switched insurance companies at the bank, which threw things for a loop. They came back and said, well, we hate to tell you this, but your none of the clinics that you have, none of the transplant centers that you have in Kansas City qualify for our, I forgot, pyramid of excellence or whatever they were calling it, circle of excellence. So we need to talk about where you want to go get your transplant done. And your options are University of Nebraska, Omaha, or Barnes-Jewish in St. Louis. And I have friends in St. Louis. Okay. I had a friend of my parents who actually had a double lung transplant at Barnes in St. Louis and had really good and really spoke, very, very well, favorably about them. And so I elected to go to Barnes-Jewish. I'm in Kansas City, so I'm all the way across the state. And we worked through it. We got the testing done. I remember going over and getting the 28 tubes of blood drawn at one visit and thinking, okay, if I pass out now, who's going to haul me out? And I got listed eventually at Barnes-Jewish, which probably would have been 2010 late. Okay. I got a call like a month after getting listed that they thought they might have a kidney for me, and they'd call me back in a half an hour to tell me whether to come or not. And when 10:30 became 4:30 in the afternoon, I sort of figured that was not me, but I also thought it was way early from what I was expecting. I was expecting 2 years for typical Midwestern wait times, but it sort of got me thinking about the fact that, wait a second, I'm here at work today. I didn't have a go bag packed or with me at work, and I'm going to take off and go to St. Louis. And, you got to get organized on it. So that helped me with my thinking, getting sort of straightened some of that. In 2011, in December 23rd, I got my second call from Barnes-Jewish saying they had a kidney. It was a match for me. How fast did I think I could get over there? And I'm like, ooh, let's see how fast the police can catch me on the way over. Because they gave me 2.5 hours, and it's 3 hours, and it's 245 miles or so. So it's like, okay, I'm going to be speeding a little bit. And this time I took my mother along with me, and so she was white knuckle gripping the dashboard the whole time. And I got over there. Mom. I got over there and got checked in, and they did a little bit of overnight dialysis on me. And the night nurse came and told me the next thing you're going to see is going to be a doctor coming in. He's going to have a little white cup in his hand that's going to have 2 pills in it. We'll start wiping out your immune system, and we'll then take you down to the emergency room and start the operation. You're next on board. And I saw then about 5 minutes later, here came 2 doctors There was no hands out. They both had clipboards really clutched to their chests. And they were there to tell me that, the kidney had been damaged and was not usable, which again happens. It was 2 days before Christmas, and I was thinking I was getting the greatest Christmas gift of all time. And, I called home, told family we weren't going to do Christmas until a later date because we were going to be in St. Louis for a little while. And then I was going to be, off by myself in isolation for a while. And didn't happen. So we drove home, and the nurse and everybody said, your time's coming. We feel this, and we know this wasn't what you wanted. And it's sort of a crappy Christmas, but, don't worry. 2 weeks later, it was a Thursday afternoon, 4:30 in the afternoon, and I got a call from Barnes-Jewish again. Well, it's good news and bad news. We have a kidney that you are a prime candidate for, but you're fifth in line when I started. You're fifth in line. So it's your choice. We'd love to have you come over for the night, but there's no guarantee. And fifth in line, the odds aren't that great on this. And I called my mom and I talked to my boss, and I told my boss, I'll be out tomorrow. I'm just going to take a personal day. I'll be back on Monday. Don't worry about it. I just want to show them that I'm willing to drive from Kansas City to St. Louis so they don't forget me. And so we drove over, and drove over and checked in, and I went over and checked in to get my blood work and stuff drawn. They told me that I was now when I checked in, I was the fourth in line. One of the others had been dropped because they had a fever. And I think that was the primary, if I remember correctly. And then by the time they did all the workups and the tests and stuff and were taking me to hospital bed, they said there were three of us left. Another one was not qualified because of labs. And so there were three of us left, but they didn't think it was going to happen for me, but they really appreciated me coming. I made the comment, my dialysis day is Friday. I'm probably going to push it to try and get back for my appointment. And they said, we'll dialyze you overnight or tomorrow before you leave. In the middle of the night, they got me up, and instead of doing a full dialysis, they were doing stuff to try and balance all the minerals in my bloodstream, which I thought was sort of interesting. Different and interesting. And the guy that was doing it, I have buttonholes that I used all the time and had used since very soon after I started dialysis. And the guy wasn't familiar with buttonholes, and he dinged me again with the needles. It's like, okay, this is not one of my favorite trips, but whatever. So the next morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, the night nurse, who had been my same night nurse from the time before, comes in the room, and she's holding a little white cup in her hand and a cup of water in the other. And she says, what I need you to do is I need you to take these 2 pills in this cup, because it's going to start, we need to start wiping out your immune system. And the water is to help you wash it down. And by the way, you're the first scheduled patient for today. You're going to have the early transplant slot today, and you're getting a kidney. And I, was overcome with stuff. And I said, okay, I got 2 calls I need to make. My mother was in the hotel next to the hospital, and I called her so she didn't come over and see, nobody in the bed and the bed maid and worry what happened to me overnight. And so I called her and told her, and she's like, well, make them wait. And it's like, I'm not making them wait. You come over when you're ready. You don't need to meet the surgeons and the anesthesiologists. That's me. And then my second call was to my boss to say, I hope you don't take this hard, but I think I lied to you when I told you last night I was going to be back on Monday, because I'm not coming back on Monday. It's going to be probably, the 6 weeks before I can come back, before I get medical clearance to come back from a short-term leave. And she said, why? What's the matter with you? I'm like, well, I'm going down and getting a kidney in about 10 minutes. And so that was, the news she wanted to hear too. So I got wheeled in, got the new kidney, got out without any issues. Spent a little time in the recovery room, and then went up to ICU for the first day. And there's a phone in the room, and I picked it up and called my boss and said, hey, what's up? And she said, who is this? And I'm like, don't play games with me. And she said, well, I would have said it was you, but the voice is strong. It sounds so much different than you have for the last 3+ years. And so, that was sort of that little bit of a traumatic moment with me. And she got a bunch of other people on the phone, and she's like, well, we can't do this. We're going to tire him out. And it's like, you don't understand. Right now, I have so much energy, zooming through my body. I'll talk to anybody that wants to for a few minutes until they come and make me hang up. And that's how it went. And it's been smooth ever since, thankfully.
Okay. Have you had any issues or complications with the kidney since your transplant?
No, nothing with the kidney. I have a case of osteoporosis in my left hip, my left leg. Everybody knows was from the dialysis. I've had to have most of my teeth replaced because they all started cracking. So, those are the things, and they're incidentals, but there are things that can happen.
Okay. So since 2012 and it's 2024, so you've had this transplant quite a while.
I've had it for 12 years.
Wow. Congratulations, Mike.
It was a deceased donor.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's something, again, I would say to everybody, that's a personal decision with everybody on what they're willing, what type of a kidney they want, whether they are accepting of a deceased donor, whether they are going to try and get a living donor. I had a hard time in some ways reconciling myself. My parents were too old. My father, as I said, had MS. So, there are reasons with them. I had a couple of friends that wanted to give, but one of them didn't have insurance currently. And I was like, no, I can't do that to you when you're out in a profession where you're not going to have insurance. And a couple of others was like, for various reasons, I don't feel comfortable with that. So I sort of made a personal moral decision that I was going to stick with a deceased donor.
Okay. Let's talk for a minute about any recent kidney advocacy work that you're involved in currently. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Since I'm not with DPC, after I stepped down from the board, I did do one of the virtual calls for them. But again, it was time to get some new blood, and there are several people from Kansas, from my area, my congressional district, that really wanted to get involved more, and I blocked that opportunity for 12 years. So I've been involved with a couple of the local groups here in town and some support groups through churches and other organizations where I've got a friend that's a part of it, or somebody I work with who goes to a church and they're having a discussion, or they have a support group they're trying to put together for various medical things, a lot of which is cancer, other things. But there are also a large number of kidney failure patients or families that are experiencing this, and I'll go and speak to them and share my story and try and keep an upbeat picture on it.
Okay. Mike, do you have any final statements you would like to make to our audience tonight?
And I think we carried everything up. I think it's keep a positive attitude. Remember that your kidney disease and the progression is really something you need to manage and you need to be in control of. Don't let the doctors push you around. Don't just sit there and accept things without understanding what they were. That's another thing I did early on. And at one point, my nephrologist here and the transplant center in St. Louis were having a disagreement over the uses of Sensipar for parathyroidism, hyperparathyroidism. And I was finally the one that sort of negotiated a truce between them because Barnes Jewish does not believe in using Sensipar at all. And so we reached a compromise decision. But it's like I was hearing from both sides. I was hearing from the transplant team. I was hearing from my nephrologist. And it was finally, you guys need to put up a call and let me join on it because I'm the most involved person here. I appreciate what you guys are both trying to do, and I don't want to violate rules from either side. But at some point, I need to be included in this discussion. I think that's important, is being involved with your medical care. listening to what they have to say. It's not always pleasant news. It's not always fun stuff, but let's go ahead and just listen and see what they do and ask them questions.
Okay. Anything else, Mike?
I think that's it.
Okay. I just wanted to say it's been a long time since we talked, but what a terrific discussion tonight, and I appreciate you coming on and
Sure.
raising awareness for kidney patients and educating all of us about your experiences. You've had some tremendous advocacy experiences, and you have some great kidney stories, and I can't thank you enough for taking time to speak to us tonight.
And maybe that's the other thing I would say, Jim, is, I mean, you've done your way through AAKP. I was with DPC. You know, at the end of the day, we're both doing the same thing, advocating for kidney patients. And that's something I would encourage everybody to get involved with. I wasn't an advocate to begin with. You know, I sort of stumbled into this. And the first time I was in Capitol Hill, I was scared. You know, oh my God, I'm going to make a big mess out of this. This is not going to go well. I'm going to fall flat in my face in front of my congressman. And everybody walks you through it. And it's a natural, and you learn and you grow. And every time you do it, you get a little bit more confident. You get a little bit more information build up, and you become a better advocate. So now
Excellent.
I said I'll try to be quiet on that note.
Okay. Well, listen, Mike, I'm going to let you go. I have a couple of things to close up with the audience, but I did want to say, you know, what a terrific job you did tonight, and I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us. And just want to remind everybody that we'll be sharing the instant replay. Should be up all week. If you missed the broadcast, don't worry about it. You know, Mike and I will be on all my Facebook groups and platforms all this week. I have over 100 groups on Facebook. So if you missed this, you have friends that missed this, you know, there'll be plenty of opportunities to catch the replay. All right. Well, Michael, again, thank you. That concludes our broadcast for the evening. Again, I want to thank everybody that supported me while I was in the hospital. I'm trying to get better. Hopefully this time it'll take. And I'll see everybody next week. You have a good week, folks.